How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and your guys absolutely buzzing. I'm so excited to get into our latest Big Mets update segment because the boys have been unstoppable. I was there yesterday that many of you guys saw in our post-game coverage. Make sure to check it out after watching this in case you haven't, because we were live from Citi Field and their Cadillac Club right as Charlie Marte walked it off to give the Mets a 7-0 homestand and a 12-1 start to the year there at home. The Mets have been dominant. They've been unstoppable, and the best has yet to come for this Mets team still as they get set for a 4-game series beginning tomorrow at the time of recording this against the Nationals. So we're going to give you guys a complete series preview before we wrap up the show, as well as our latest prospect report. But before we get there, we're going to further expand on what are the key takeaways with the Mets' dominant homestand, not just including guys in Francisco Lindor, but how Brett Baty may have just swung himself to stay on this Mets roster for the time being. We're going to get into what Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns are more than likely to do in the case of Brett Baty, Luis Angel Acuna, Jose Azocar, with guys like Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez returning as soon as tomorrow. A lot to get into, everybody, so smash that like and subscribe button as your first chime in. It really means a lot. And let me know all your initial reactions in the comments down below. On a scale of 1 to 10, how ecstatic have you been with a Mets season start at 18-7, looking like one of, if not the best in the game right now, everybody? And we're going to have more to say about that in a video later today, if not tomorrow, so be on the lookout for it. I'm so excited. I don't want to waste any time, folks, but before we get into it, let's hear a quick word from our amazing sponsor here on the platform. And before we move forward into today's video, everybody, let's first hear a quick word from our sponsor that I'm so excited to break down, that being at Mando. Mando, the all-purpose, all-body deodorant, which I'm so excited to get into. Why, you might ask, Wardy? That's because this is a product that I've been using well before they even reached out and we've connected here to get a sponsorship deal done. Shout out to all you amazing Mets fans who helped make this possible, that we are reaching highs here on the platform, that we're getting deals with Mando. Love Mando, love their whole body deodorant. And if you guys don't know Mando, let me enlighten you folks, because they have a plethora of products that, mind you, are all clinically proven to block odor all day and control your body odor up to not 24, not 48, but yes, you guessed it, 72 hours. This has been a massive game changer from the time that I've used their product over this past year versus the previous deodorants that I've used. And mind you, this is not just for pits. This can be for behind your knees. This can be for, the areas that we're not going to talk about. Wherever you feel like you need deodorant, that is where Mando comes into play. And with their starter pack, which I have in my possession to a degree, folks, you have a lot of the other amazing products that they have, including their normal whole body deodorant Mando stick. We have their Mando wipes, which I absolutely love. Where were these back when I was in middle school and high school, especially, where I'm sweating bullets throughout the day just because I'm sitting there stressed doing classwork and stuff? These would have been awesome to have for my pits throughout the entire school day. I digress. We got the whole body deodorant as well, which is fantastic. We have the Mando body wash here, which is so good, and one of my favorites as well, the whole body deodorant, but this time in the liquid form here. Again, all the Mando products, I cannot say enough glowing things about them. Sponsor or not, I will continue to promote this brand, and for great reason, everybody. So now I'm calling on each and every one of you. If you guys want to get in on Mando, listen up to the following, folks, and please sign up today. How do you sign up? It's by controlling the body odor anywhere with @shop.mando and get $5 off your starter pack. Mind you, that's over 40% off with our amazing promo code. You guessed it, Wardy, W-A-R-D-Y, at shopmando.com. Shout out to Mando once more for being an awesome sponsor in the platform, and thank you, Mets fans, for making it happen. Alrighty, folks, let's first kickstart this conversation by getting into this homestand. As we know, the Mets just took care of the Philadelphia Phillies without a problem, and there is nothing better, absolutely curb stomping, kicking the teeth in on your arch rivals, a continuation of what you did last year there in the NLDS. The House of Horrors continues there for the Philadelphia Phillies, as they have been putrid at Citi Field over the last couple of years, and for the Mets, they continue to ride high now, winning their last each individual 7 games, all at home. And now, as we look forward to this 4-game set beginning against the Nationals, we have to talk about what has been working so right for the Mets over these past stretch of games. And let's just start with the run differential, right? The Mets over their past 7 games in this homestand have outscored the opposing teams, that being the St. Louis Cardinals, over 4 games, and the 3-game set against the Phillies by a total of 33-17. And when we take a look at each individual game here, there's something notable to me, and that's the fact that these are all ball games that were within reach for either side. This This was not one of those things where, oh, the Mets blew them out every single time. No. And the Mets' last 7 games, each win at home here, they won 4-1 there in game 1 that we saw against the Cardinals. Then it was 5-4 in a sweaty one that we saw there against the Cardinals in game 2. Game 3, 3-0. Game 4, 7-4. Game 5, 5-4 there against the Phillies to kickstart the series. Game 6 that we saw there, everybody, 5-1. And Game 7 now, the most recent one from this past day, 4-3. A lot of these have been tight ball games. And you want to know what, folks? I love that. This makes me even more impressed than ever before with the Mets, because this is, mind you, when Juan Soto didn't hit a lick yet against the Philadelphia Phillies, and I'm excited for this National Series in hopes that he can finally start to break out the way that we want him to. Bryce Harper didn't hit a lick in this Philly series either, so it goes for both sides. But what I love most is that when you take a look at the Mets offensive production, they had a collected team batting average of 274, but it was not a blowout in any one of these games for the most part, which tells you that they're grinding everything out. And in some of these games, they were losing the early goings of it, or they lost the lead, and it still didn't matter because they retaliated and they bounced back a half inning to a full inning or so later. It does not take the Mets long to get back in a groove and say they get thrown a wrench in a ball game, and that has everything to do with the mentality that they started to adopt last season throughout the 2024 Mets, the OMG Mets, the Grimace Mets, the whatever you want to call them Mets. They had a great run last year, and one part of their identity that clearly transferred over from last year to this year is that resiliency, is that never say die attitude, knowing that even if you're down by a couple runs entering the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, it doesn't matter because we know we're going to rally back and make a difference. The same way the Mets were losing 3-2 heading the bottom of the 10th after Max Kranick somehow, some way kept that a one-run ball game, because Max Kranick, no panic Kranick, is nothing short of a dog, and he's one of our favorite players on the Mets so far this year, not just because I'm friends with him, but more so because of the fact that the guy has been simply dominant so far to start the year for the Mets as a guy who grew up a diehard Mets fan. But to see what the Mets are not doing on the pitching side of the ball, which has been the most impressive offensively, for Pete Alonso to retaliate the way that he did to tie it up, and then for Starling Marte with the broken bat single up the middle to walk it off. This has just been nothing short of the best baseball that I personally witnessed as a Mets fan since covering them in a stretch to begin this season. 1, but 2, it's the comfortability aspect. The Mets are 11 games above 500 right now, and they're not even close to playing on all full cylinders. They don't have Sean Manaea. They don't have Frankie Montas. Juan Soto hasn't done much yet. So the idea that things can only get better from here is beyond exciting for a Mets fan like me, and I'm sure is the exact same for each and every one of you. And when we talk about individual player performances, we can't talk about this past Mets homestand without breaking down further which has been the most dominant man outside of Alonso, and that of course has to be Mr. Smile and Francisco Lindor. Just take a look at these numbers for Francisco Lindor over the Mets past homestand or that 7-game stretch. 14 for 30 with 4 home runs, 8 RBIs, a 467 average, and a just under 1,400 OPS. Francisco Lindor has had, at least 3 3-hit games throughout this homestand or so. The guy has been absolutely tearing the cover off the ball, and from having that walk-off heroic that we saw the night before to then the next day hitting not 1 but 2 bombs, this man is beyond locked in right now. This is the best Francisco Lindor that I feel that I've seen, especially to start a season, and as great as he was throughout the stretches of the season last year, this is as good as any. I mean, when you take an individual approach to each month last season, from May 15th or so on, once he started batting the leadoff position, Lindor was tremendous all summer long, but I really can't recall a week to 2 week stretch that has just been this utterly dominant. Like, this is up there with quite literally the best Francisco Lindor baseball he's ever played in his career, including not just with the Mets, but also at the time the Cleveland Indians turned Guardians. So Francisco Lindor, talk about El Captain. What else is there that needs to be said here, everybody? He has just been jaw-dropping, and we are seeing the immediate impact that he has on this team in that leadoff position on a day-by-day, night-by-night basis. And as someone who had the privilege to be in attendance for this past day's game, I can tell you that, again, 30 to 35 plus thousand strong there at Citi Field on a Wednesday day game, mind you, and everyone was singing My Girl without a problem. He is clearly riding high with the fan attendance, and speaking of fan attendance, everybody, this goes in direct hand with not only Lindor's production, but the Mets' dominance so far. Guys, listen to this. The Mets, mind you, this was their 31st 7-game homestand since Citi Field opened, and it was the highest attendance ever, with more than 267,000 fans for an average attendance of roughly 39,000. Like, are you kidding me? So yeah, the fans are showing up early, and the best part is that the players are reciprocating. They appreciate the fact that everyone's showing up to the ballpark early this year, as this is not something that we have really seen in years before whatsoever. And you guys see the difference it makes when you actually show up and support your team and don't talk down on them but uplift them early to begin the season. This is what happens, everybody. It does wonders. The players have said it themselves. Lindor has countlessly said it. Soto has countlessly said it, how much he appreciates, and he actually said, I don't think fans seem to realize just how much, again, whether it is calling out for specific players, to give them, a hype up throughout the game for an ovation, or to just support them throughout the course of the game. Fans don't really realize just how much of an impact that has on the players on a day-by-day basis, and we're seeing that yet again here with the great production from Francisco Lindor, along many others. And even though Soto hasn't found his groove yet, we know that's going to happen. It's just a matter of when versus if. But Francisco Lindor, guys, I gotta hear in the comments down below, is this the best Francisco Lindor you guys have ever seen in a Mets uniform right now? Would you say that his stretches last year trumps what he's done so far this year? Whatever your thoughts are, drop them down below. I would love to hear them, because he has just been absolutely a treat to watch and nothing short of it. Because when we go on to talking about Francisco Lindor, let's talk about a guy now that didn't have an overly dominant homestand but was productive, and now is trying to play his way to stay on this Mets roster, and that is Brett Baty, everybody. Let's talk about Brett Baty here for a hot minute to see what he's done, because over the past 22 plate appearances for him, and then Luisangel Acuna's last 28, and I want to give a big shout out to my guy Keith from the Shane Sons podcast, as he posted this on X earlier for the splits, and they're fantastic. And when we look at Brett Baty in particular, over his last 22 plate appearances, he's batting .333 with over 1,000 OPS. Ripped that no-doubter of a shot to Zach Wheeler that we saw this past day. I was so grateful to be in attendance for something like that. Are you killing? Just look at this tank. Upper decky, not a problem there for Brett the Hitman. No, Brett Bonds Baty is what we're talking about here. But Brett Baty has been impressive. The defense has certainly been sharp. That has been what's carried him so far, both at the hot corner when Vientos missed some games, or there when Vientos was at DH, or even not starting in general just because he got an off day. Brett Baty has been as advertised on the defensive end, but the big bugaboo and the big question at this point has been on the offensive end. And in comparison to Luisangel Acuna's last 28 plate appearances, Acuna is batting .360 with right around, we're seeing a .429 on base percentage, a .480 slug for a .160 WRC plus. Hilariously enough, Brett Baty has a higher WRC plus than Luisangel Acuna since April 14th at .190. And that has more so to do with the bomb that he just hit against Zach Wheeler, a very limited sample size. But the point here is that Brett Baty, in these limited sample sizes, even in games where he's not starting every day out there, he is starting to create more of an immediate impact, whether that's stealing a bag for you every now and then, doing his best Luisangel Acuna impression, whether that's actually pulling a baseball and lefting it the way that he did multiple times this past homestand finally, or it's the great defense that we're seeing at second and or third base for the most part. Brett Baty is doing his role to the best of his abilities right now after starting the season nothing short of putrid, and now with both Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez expected to return to this Mets lineup as soon as tomorrow, this Friday, per Carlos Mendoza, and that's something that shouldn't be a shock to anybody. I've told you guys this for the past 48 to 72 hours at minimum here on the platform, that would be the case. The same way I told you that depending on how player performance goes, what's going to happen with Jeff McNeil and Alvarez returning, knowing that you have a bit of a logjam, a good problem on your hands with guys like Brett Baty, Luisangel Acuna, and Jose Azocar. And that brings me to my entire point of this conversation, everybody. Even with Jose Azocar's two-hit game that he had for the Mets just 48 hours ago or so, Brett Baty's home run to right may have truly just solidified himself for at least another week or so on this Mets roster, and here's why. And it doesn't just go in hand with that latest home run, but it certainly factors in, because this is a results-oriented business, as David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza famously say all the time, and in order to have results, hopefully, if they're good, you're going to stay on the roster. In the case of Baty, he has been stepping up in his limited playing time and honestly profiles very well as a true defensive option for the Mets to consider in this infield. As so much so that Brett Baty is without question the Mets' best defensive third baseman and is as good as Acuna or McNeil, I think, on the concept of at least being decent at second base. Baty has flashed the leather greatly. Acuna has flashed the leather greatly. So this isn't a slight on him. But the reason why we're not debating between Acuna and Baty is because Acuna is not going anywhere. He has clearly solidified himself to stay on this roster. He looks like a guy that's going to help this Mets team all year long. And Brett Baty has the potential to do that too, but the likely potential of that happening will be more so in a utility role where he's not playing every day as a starter, but say he gets a start at second base when Acuna doesn't based on matchups. Say he gets a start at the hot corner when they want Vientos at DH, or if, say, Vientos is banged up again, then he comes off the bench or something, right? There are routes to go down, including late game defensive replacement, pinch running, both things that Baty can do exceptionally well for this team versus Jose Azocar. And while Azocar gives you another true outfield option, I think it goes without saying that given the fact that David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza have both said verbatim, Jeff McNeil, Brandon Nimmo, Luis Angel Acuna are all going to get reps at center field. What McNeil's return is telling of them not being fully comfortable with Tyrone getting consistent reps there, one, but also that they don't love the idea of deferring to other guys and their internal options like I just broke down for each and every one of you. So what this will mean then is that you will have times where, say, McNeil's in center, right? Acuna is at second and Baty's coming off the bench, or at third. Or you're going to have games where Baty is at second base, McNeil will say in left, if not center. Maybe Jeff's coming off the bench for a game because Jeff is the best utility option this Mets team has. He plays outfield, infield, can play all exceptionally well. And we know the bat-to-ball skills has fluctuated when it comes to his contact ability, but let's see what he can do now with the torpedo bat after having himself a nice rehab assignment that I'm going to break down for you guys here shortly. But in the case of Brett Baty, I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Between himself and Jose Azocar, who do you think is most deserving to stay on this roster and why? Because as long as it doesn't hurt his development, I think Brett Baty staying on this Mets roster is what is best for him going forward right now. And if he does stay on this roster but get little to no playing time for the next week, week and a half plus, then the Mets should reconvene and make a decision there to probably send him down, because then that's where you're truly wasting opportunities, wasting talent when they could be getting consistent reps in AAA, something that Baty doesn't have nearly enough of in comparison to someone like even Mark Vientos. Baty still has not played much at all at the AAA level throughout his respective young career, so getting more of a sample size down there is not a terrible thing if it is simply because the Mets don't have room for him and they can't find playing time. With that being said, though, guys, let me know in the chat down below, how do you feel about Brett Baty and the Mets' current good logjam, a good problem to have on the front, and figuring out what they're going to do with guys like Jeff McNeil, Brett Baty, obviously, Jose Azocar, Luis Angel Acuna, and obviously Francisco Alvarez, who is returning. What does that mean, everybody? Sadly, it will mean the end of Hayden Senger in a Mets uniform, at least for right now. Now, Hayden Senger, who's been in the Mets organization going back to like 2018 or so, was working in the Whole Foods this past offseason, just trying to make ends meet, which I commend him greatly for there as a full-time minor leaguer. He gets the call, and he takes full advantage of the opportunity. Senger is one of the better defensive catchers in all Major League Baseball, and Baseball Savant tells you that with their percentiles right now, and the pitchers are saying it themselves. David Pearson has spoken glowingly of him from this past day. We've seen many others talk about how well he has been in calling games, not just that, but also putting the bat to the ball. Senger has been surprising to actually having some solid at-bats and giving up some singles, or, just getting on base there any which way possible. So Hayden Senger, it's unfortunate that this is going to be the reason as to why he has to get sent down, but this is just the nature of the game when you have Francisco Alvarez coming back from injury with that short, compact swing that he worked on a lot this past offseason. Alvarez has the utmost potential to be something very special in Queens as their true primary catcher, but they're obviously going to still platoon time to a degree with both Alvarez and Torrens, not only based on matchups, based on performance, and based on how guys are feeling and the scheduling. So what that means is when you have a night to a day game, don't expect Alvy to be catching both games, right? Naturally, if, say, Alvarez is catching the night game and then the day game will be Torrens, or vice versa. If it's going to be a night game for Torrens, then it's likely going to be a day game for Alvarez, depending on if, say, Alvarez came in the game prior or not the night before as a pinch hitter. Even with that being said, he'd still probably start. So point is, everybody, is that the Mets will be created based on their matchups to see who gets more catching time than others. And this is not a slight at all to Luis Torrens, who continues to impress as ever, but Torrens knows his role very well. And we know that in a larger sample size with Luis Torrens, he's probably not going to do anything too drastic on the offensive end. He's going to have his hot streaks like what we've seen, but he's also cooled off a little bit for the most part, and I think that's notable when a guy like Alvarez is coming back, where if you talk to Mets fans 2 weeks ago, they were saying, oh, I don't even want Alvarez. You can't fit him on the roster. I'm like, guys, have we forgotten what watching baseball is? Have we forgotten the ebbs and flows of a 162? Have we forgotten that when a Luis Torrens gets hot, it's great, but it's not going to necessarily be sustainable? Again, not a slight on him, it's just a fact. So don't be surprised when Alvarez comes back and gets some pretty consistent playing time, unless he simply cannot handle MLB pitching when he first comes up or something, which I don't foresee to be the case, but we'll soon find out. Unless that is a situation, they're going to be platooning a good amount of time with Alvarez, still getting more often than not the starts between himself and Torrens, barring changes. So we will see what happens officially there for that series that begins this Friday, everybody. And speaking of that series that begins this Friday, I do really want to talk about with each and every one of you, what are we getting against the Washington Nationals for our series preview, folks? Because there's a lot going on in this National Series. The Mets have been rolling. They have been red hot, steaming. They're at Citi Field this year, 12-1. But on the road is where the Mets have had their 6 other losses this season. That's notable for the Mets because when we look at their 18-7 record, 6 of those losses, that's the vast majority. So how are the Mets able to get off to the right foot here against the Washington Nationals and their 4-game matchup that begins this Friday? Well, you need to pounce on pitching, especially when the Nationals have had some really good young pitching performances this year, and they have a really good young, exciting core that's all built in direct part because of Juan Soto. Now, the Nationals don't have officially labeled who exactly is going to be starting each game yet, but I'd imagine that we're going to see guys like Mackenzie Gore and that being in their Mr. Mitchell Parker in there at minimum. Parker pitched a couple days ago, so he'll be pitching towards the end of this series. I'd imagine Mackenzie Gore will be in there as well. That'll be at minimum. Trevor Williams may be a starter the Mets may face as well, but knowing that's unofficial at this point in time, we do have Kodai Senga at least there for game 1. Game 2 is going to be Clay Holmes. Game 3, which is going to be actually a 1:35 game. There for Game 3, that makes sense because it's Sunday. That's Tyler McGill, big drip, coming off of a 10 strikeout performance. And then Griffin Canning coming off of another solid performance for the Mets and their previous victory. So Canning, McGill, what we got there in Game 2, and Clay Holmes in Game 1, and Kodai Senga. So really excited to see how Kodai is going to fare there. Another start on the road for Kodai Senga. He's fared pretty well this year when he's been on the road, which has been nice to see. And Clay Holmes looking to try to give the Mets a solid 6-inning outing. Griffin Canning, we know what to expect with Griffin. Hopefully just can be sustainable out there. In the case of Tyler McGill, I want to see Tyler McGill follow up what he did so greatly this past start against the Phillies. Even though he didn't go deep because the walks continue to be an issue with McGill, if he can just get that walk rate down, that kick change looks disgusting, doing his best Clay Holmes impression, but even better a little bit. And on top of it all, he has the consistent velocity where he's actually sitting right now. We're looking at anywhere from 95, 96, 97 plus on the gun. And McGill needs that consistency with his velocity to have success. And against a young, hungry Washington Nationals team, the Mets are going to need to make sure that they have more consistency with their pitching staff. They're currently ranked number 1 in Major League Baseball entering this series. But let's talk about some individual players that I think are very notable for the Nationals to keep an eye out for, because there are plenty of guys on the Nationals that are concerning, but really I think it has to do a lot with the bulk of the guys that they acquired and the Juan Soto trade with the Padres. And it's kind of crazy that now Mike Rizzo a couple years ago thought, okay, we're going to get a haul for Soto. He's never going to be in the NL East again. Little did that schmuck know a couple years later that Juan Soto would be now going to dominate against those same Nationals for the next 10 to 15 years. And in the case of those key acquisitions, the most notable right now that many believe is James Wood. James Wood, the towering left-handed bat who pulled a baseball this past day like 117 miles per hour. The guy usually goes oppo, but he turned on one inside on, oh my God, was it demolished. He already has 8 home runs this season, can steal bags for you too. He has himself a 256 average, but a 356 on base and a 578 slug for a 156 WRC plus. Nathaniel Lowe, that we can't forget about. He is their new first baseman coming from the Texas Rangers this past year. He has 4 home runs, a 291 average, a 365 on base, and a 488 slug for a 138 WRC plus. Keibert Ruiz, can't forget about him either, everybody. He was a part of the Max Scherzer and Trey Turner trade with the Dodgers a couple years ago. Ruiz, a switch hitting catcher, is finally starting to blossom. We're seeing that this year. 325 average, 372 on base, 450 slug. Really impressive start for Ruiz. He's finally starting to break out after an underwhelming past year or two, I'd say. He was a 132 WRC plus, so 32% above league average as a batter. CJ Abrams, one of my favorite players in the National League, which is crazy to say, knowing that he is a National, but he's a really, really fun player to watch, and I hope he doesn't torch us too much. 4 home runs, 4 stolen bags. We're looking at a 244 average, 289 on base, and a 585 slug for a 134 WRC plus. Abrams, Wood, what do they have in common? They are part of the Juan Soto trade. Then we look on the pitching side of things. Who was that key pitcher in the Juan Soto trade? It was Mackenzie Gore. And we know how good Mackenzie Gore can be. He absolutely destroyed, I believe, the Phillies to start the year in the home opener of the year. But Gore's absolutely nasty. When we take a look at him so far this season, he has himself a 3.41 ERA and a 2.2 FIP. And he has been nails. We're looking at a sub-1 home run per 9. But when we look at Mitchell Parker, everybody, that has been, I think, the biggest story out of the Washington Nationals rotation this year. A 1.39 ERA across 5 starts. Went 8 shutty against the Baltimore Orioles a couple nights ago. He's disgusting. He's only allowing home runs at a .28 average right now, which is absurd. Expect to face both of them in this series, which I'm not looking forward to. That will not be an easy task whatsoever. Trevor Williams, the former friend, now foe, is a guy keep an eye out, because even though he has a 5-year ERA, Williams usually tends to do well against his former teams, including our Mets, so he's notable as well. The guy that I would love to face in this series, I think, to a degree, is Jake Irvin. Jake Irvin is a guy the Mets have had success against in the past. The right-hander was a 3.68 ERA, but a 4.66 FIP on the season. Not sure if the Mets are going to be perfectly slotted up with him or not this season, so we'll find out on that front. But we're also going to be facing, again, former Met, now foe, ever since he tossed that glove over into the stands, and Mr. Jorge Lopez. That is the man who's the true Mets unsung hero from last year, because without Jorge Lopez doing that, the Mets don't make their decisions. Jose Iglesias doesn't go on the run that he goes on, and all that isn't even history. It just doesn't happen, right? But Jorge Lopez, who had himself a not so great situation, pretty much throwing right at the head of Andrew McCutchen a week or so ago. I think he did get suspended a short period of time for it, if I'm not mistaken, or fined at least. Tommy Pham wanted all the smoke, and Daniel Vogelbach, one of the coaches in the Pirates organization, had to hold him back. So a lot of former Met on former Met crime going on there in DC not all that long ago. Let's see what happens in this series against the Nationals in a 4-game set. And for the Mets, they just have to continue to go out and play their game. And in order for them to play their game, they not only need continued production from the entire top to bottom of their lineup and that pitching staff to continue to blossom the way that it's been, but they need to make sure they don't underestimate this Nationals team. Not that I think they've underestimated any team so far this year, but the Nationals aren't a joke. They are such a young, hungry team that I will not at all be shocked they find themselves in wildcard contention this year out of the National League. They are on the up and up. They made great strides this past year, and took them a little bit before they fully decided to be trade deadline sellers there this past season that we saw. But what we have seen from the Nationals has been a young, hungry, pesky team to face. And in order to get past them, we not only need a continuation of what we've been doing, but we need Juan Soto to be Juan Soto. And no better way, no better time for Juan Soto to be the guy that he's expected to be, that he's paid to be, than to dominate in a 4-game set against a team that traded him away because they wouldn't give him the dollars he was looking for. And not that over $400 million in extension is a bad contract to turn down, but when you get double that 3 years later there in the free agent market or so, how can you fault Juan Soto for making the decision that he did, right? No one's at fault for that one. But Mike Rizzo definitely doesn't want to see Juan Soto have a good series, and that's why we need to have Juan Soto have a dominant series. We need to see Juan Soto hit his first tank for the first time since that series against the Minnesota Twins. We need to see Juan Soto continue to tear the cover off the ball and go for all fields when he's at his best. And if there's anything going the Mets' favor in this specific matchup, it's not only the fact that we're playing the Nationals, so you know that he's going to have that further chip on his shoulder. He knows this ballpark better than most. He's playing this ballpark more than anywhere else, so he's ecstatic at the idea of going back in right field there and absolutely dominating, hopefully hitting tanks to right and oppo. But when it comes to Juan Soto, everybody, the big thing is the fact that we are on the road. I know it would be nice to see him dominate at Citi Field when everyone else has. He just hasn't done it yet. Was so close to hitting that towering home run a couple of nights ago against the Phillies. But Soto, all of his home runs were on the road. One against the Astros in Game 2, and then back-to-back games there in the first and second game of the Minnesota Twins series. The most power implementation he has had this year has not been at Citi Field. So by doing that math alone, I like the odds of Juan Soto balling out in this series and giving us at least one, if not multiple home runs to be ecstatic about as fans. But we'll see what happens, everybody. I'm not going to sell you guys something that is not necessarily true. I'm just hoping as a fan we see Juan Soto have his best series yet for the Mets, as they are absolutely rolling right now with their 18-7 record. And before we get out of here, everybody, let's now talk about the Mets farm report, because there's been a lot of exciting things that we have seen there across the Mets farm, from Port St. Lucie all the way up there to the Bigs. I have multiple things I want to share with you guys here to take away from the highlights beside me. So let's go ahead and do exactly that on the prospect front, everybody. And let's actually start with the Brooklyn Cyclones, because there's something really notable that's happening in Brooklyn right now that I want to share with each and every one of you. Let's move this here. Guys, take a look at this. Brooklyn Cyclones, Joel Diaz with 4 more shutout frames from this past night, and now he has tossed 15.2 scoreless frames to start the 2025 season. Exciting stuff here for Joel Diaz, who looks like one of the best pitching prospects the Mets currently have stored right now in Port St. Lucie with the Mets. And I apologize, I meant to say Brooklyn, not Port St. Lucie. You have to wonder, how long is it going to be before he gets moved up to Double-A with the Rumble Ponies this year? Should he be able to keep up this dominant performance so far this season? And speaking of dominant performances, with the Brooklyn Cyclones that we've seen so far, especially on the reliever front, let's talk more about my guy, Ryan Lambert. Ryan Lambert, that many of you guys know. Shout out to my guy, Michael Mayer, as well, who's always great keeping up with the prospects through Metsmerize. Check him out, as always, with their Metsmerize blog. Ryan Lambert, guys, let's see what he did this past night. Had himself a nasty first save of the season on Wednesday for the Cyclones, and the fastball was up to 99. He has now pitched 7 innings of 1 earned run, 1 walk, 15 strikeout balls so far this season. In case you guys don't know Ryan Lambert, great story. There is a specific interview that my guy Mark and James have done. You guys know them in the Mets community. Did back this past offseason with Ryan Lambert, and Ryan broke down how, this guy is an absolute machine. He'll pound like 30 to 40 raw eggs just to do the best to increase his strength and to be as fit as he can possibly be. And Lambert has not only been high on the velocity, but Buddy has touched over 102. He's been in the 103 plus category. So we know there's serious velocity with Ryan Lambert, and that's why he's more than likely going to skyrocket through the Mets farm to being a pivotal piece of their bullpen within the next couple years. He's that good, he's that exciting, and he's just getting started. Another guy that stands out here, not on the Cyclone level, but what we see here with the Rumble Ponies, is Jack Weniger. He has been one of, if not the most impressive pitching prospects so far for the Mets this year. Look at these stats: 20 innings, 11 hits, 2 earned runs, 5 walks, 32 strikeouts, and 89 pitches to 60 strikes. His season ERA is down to .90, and we're going to expand more about that just here in a second, everybody. But before I do, let's first take a look on exactly what happened with the Cyclones in their latest game, because they won 2-1 over the Blue Claws, and the notables here was that Carson Bench went 1 for 3 with a run scored. First-round pick from the Mets last year. Nothing really else offensively happened this matchup, but Joel Diaz looked nasty, that we saw. Lambert looked good, too, on the pitching end. We also saw in Port St. Lucie for the Mets, they won their game 6-3 over the, I'm going to butcher the name, Tortugas? Tortugas? However you guys pronounce it. I know I probably butchered that. White Boy Wardy here. I apologize. But 6-3, Syracuse Mets win here, and the notables are on the offensive front, including Ewing in center field, continuing to look fantastic. Didn't have a hit, but did have an RBI, and has a 389 average and over 1,000 OPS. Can't imagine he'll be there much longer before he gets moved up. We have seen Colin Houck, our third base prospect, that infield prospect that we drafted in the first round. The final first-round pick of Billy Alvarez regime as a Met, if I'm not mistaken. 1 for 3 with 2 runs scored. Sub 200 average on the season. More work to do there for sure. Other than that, nothing too notable. Davison Gutierrez has kind of fallen off a cliff, sadly, since his hot start this year, the Venezuelan catching prospect, but he can certainly pick it up. All it just takes is a nice hot streak for a week that he hasn't done so much for the most part to this point. Pitching-wise, nothing too notable that I want to get into there, so now let's get on to everybody talking about what is going on with the Rumble Ponies, because Jack Weniger was fantastic in his latest outing. Trey McLaughlin had himself a scoreless inning and 3 strikeouts, which I love. Parsons had his scoreless inning with 2 strikeouts too. And on the offensive end, guys, Jet Williams is red hot. Jet Williams has hit a bomb not too long ago. He had a triple not too long ago. He's had doubles machine. Jet Williams looks like a guy that, again, will be with the Syracuse Mets before we know it. Batting leadoff there that we have seen for the Rumble Ponies. 1 for 4 in his latest game. 2 runs scored. Now he's batting .288 with a just under 900 OPS. Looking fantastic. Nick Morabito still having a slow start to transitioning to the Rumble Ponies, and that's okay. Ryan Clifford had himself a day, including the following that you guys are going to see right here in the highlights, if I can share it with each and every one of you. Let me just lower this. Ryan Clifford hit himself an absolute nuke that we just saw this past day for the Rumble Ponies, which is important because Ryan Clifford hasn't hit the ball out of the ballpark so much to begin the minor league season. We need him to, because he's one of the hardest hitters in the minor leagues. Mets acquired him, Andrew Gilbert, that we'll talk about shortly, and that Justin Verlander trade back in the 2023 trade deadline. And Clifford is easily one of the hardest hitters in the organization. More of that Kyle Schwarber type mentality, where he's a big lefty bat there that doesn't play great defense. That's more, corner outfield, first base type, DH type as well. and he'll hit, the Mendoza line at 250, but he'll have an OPS, north of 900 when he's really rolling. So Ryan Clifford, love to see him hitting that tank the way that he did. He had himself a day there. 2 for 3 with the 2 RBIs. Now he's up to 260 on the average and an 853 OPS. So thankfully, he's really started picking up this past week of games. And Nick Morabito, even though that he had 1 hit in this ball game, it was in fact a triple, his second this season. So we'll take that for what it is. Love to see that. And getting on to what we also love to see is these updates with the Syracuse Mets, because they had a doubleheader against one of the best farms in Major League Baseball there and the AAA affiliate for the Red Sox, including guys not only in Mr. Roman Anthony in left field, but also what you got in Marcelo Mayer, among others. Vaughn Grissom, Braves legend, if you know what a schmuck he was. If you guys remember the story from him a couple years ago. But in these doubleheader games, let's take a look at how these guys performed, specifically on the front of Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez in their final rehab games, getting themselves set now for games officially beginning tomorrow for each and every one of them. Going to roll back with the highlights here from a couple nights ago between the Mets and the Phillies, so you guys have some B-roll to look at. And now let's talk about it. So Jeff McNeil getting a start in center field in one of these 2 doubleheader games. He went 2 for 4 with an RBI, which was really nice to see. Nico Goodrum didn't do anything. Joey Meneses is still batting .303 with an 843 OPS. Nationals legend, if you know. John Singleton had a big game, 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. He's been off to a nice start there in Syracuse with the power at least. Celestino had himself a 1 for 2 game with a couple walks. Billy McKinney, Billy Mack we saw with an RBI, and Donovan Walton won 1 for 3 with a run scored. Pitching-wise, Jose Urena didn't fare as well as the first time he did, his last outing rather, where he went 4 shutty. This time he gives up 2 earned runs in 2 innings there. Austin Warren comes in and goes 1.2 scoreless. Jesus Cabrera gets rocked again, which pains me. Jesus Cabrera, I just don't know. Maybe he is not able to adjust well to AAA as a guy that's been the bigs consistently the past number of years, because Cabrera has not been off to a good start this year in Syracuse, as much as I wish it wasn't the case. Also, Daniel Nunez, very notable here. He had himself a scoreless inning with a strikeout. Big question is when is Nunez going to return? You have to imagine it's going to be as soon as this week, because if it's not as soon as this week, it's got to be sometime next week, because Nunez deserves to be back in this Mets bullpen, and I'm really not too concerned on what he's doing or not doing there in Syracuse. As long as he's healthy, as long as the stuff is there, that's the most notable thing as we evaluate Daniel Nunez returning this Mets bullpen as being a true setup man for Edwin Diaz, or just coming in various high leverage and sometimes low leverage situations. Sean Reed Foley had just 1 out there to close that 1 out. So the Mets did lose that game 5-4, but in their other one, they lost 5-4 as well. Yes, they did. Wow, that's actually hilarious. They lost back-to-back games in the doubleheader, both 5-4. And in the second game, we saw a double from Drew Gilbert. Drew Gilbert looked really good, everybody. I want you all to listen to the following stats now on the Drew Gilbert front, because since being called up to AAA Syracuse for Gilbert, coming back there from his global rehab stint in St. Lucie, he's 5 for 15 with a double and 2 walks since rejoining the Syracuse Mets, which is fantastic. So he's off to a red-hot start, batting .333 with an 821 OPS, a couple hits in this ballgame. John Singleton hit his 5th home run of the year there for AAA Syracuse, another multi-hit game for him. He's now up to 259 average and a 941 OPS, and what we saw from Jared Young, a big game for him, 2 for 3 with 2 runs scored and a walk, and Donovan Walton 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs too. So a lot of production from the boys there. And pitching wise, Dominic Hamill, who looked good his last outing, didn't look good this time. Gave up 3 runs over 3 innings. And then we saw Gieber not look so great there in 2 innings of work. And then Davinsky had a scoreless inning there to wrap it up for Syracuse in the latest 5-4 loss, everybody. But folks, that is the latest on the prospect end. That is the latest for our Big Mets Updates segment. I hope you guys enjoyed everything that we broke down today. Again, be on the lookout as we may have a video dropping as soon as later on this evening, more towards night, like not night, but anywhere I'd say maybe from 7 to 9 p.m. in that range. If it doesn't drop then it's going to drop in the AM for you guys, and that just means I'm going to drop that video instead of doing another Big Mets Update segment, because there wasn't enough to talk about outside of more on the prospect reports. So be on the lookout for it, guys. We have a lot of fun content coming out. We also have a new video dropping on my official WardyMLB YouTube channel. If not today, then in the coming days, be on the lookout for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're trying to build that puppy up as well to present MLB-wide topics to each and every one of you, and I will be live in the Bleacher Report app today, everybody. Make sure to check it out. 5 p.m. Eastern, as well as tomorrow, this Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, breaking down MLB-wide topics as I do every week in the BR app. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.